Welcome to Japanese 101, where I can teach you all the cool things that you can't normally learn in a classroom.
There are two Japanese words you should know. Tatemae, the way things appear. Honne, the way they really are.
What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be answering a question that was asked by one of my schoolmates right here. He actually has a YouTube channel. His name's Charles, if you want to check him out. I'm going to put a link down in the description, so please check him out. So this one's going to be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to fulfill this request to the best of my abilities. So today I'm going to talk about the phrase I consider to be the most important in the Japanese language.
AKA cultural appropriation.
Obviously this is just my opinion, but it is of course very important to me. And that phrase is honne and tatemae, or honne to tatemae. It is the phrase that opened up my understanding of the Japanese society. I actually discovered it.
Just discovered it.
Didn't discover it. You know, I come here all the time.
Sure I did.
No, people have been here before you, so you didn't discover it.
Oh yes, sorry. I didn't discover it.
Right.
I Columbused it. I discovered it for white people.
Right after going through a really bad breakup with a Japanese girl.
Why did you leave me?
Even though I now realize that my understanding of the breakup was actually very misguided,
Wish I had a girlfriend. God, I hate women.
it at least gave me a bit of solace, and it was indeed a blessing in disguise. Because despite the fact that I had already lived in Japan for 3 years at that point, it was the first time I really took a step towards understanding the culture. Well, truly understanding the culture. I actually discovered the meaning after reading a chapter in a book about the Japanese educational system, and it just opened up my eyes to everything. Honne and tatemae is a Japanese phrase that describes the contrast between a person's true desires, or their honne, and the behaviors and opinions that one displays openly, or facade, which is known as the tatemae. Honne may be considered contrary to what is expected by the Japanese society, and is often kept hidden except with one's closest friends. Tatemae is what is expected by society, and is often required by somebody's circumstances, and these may not match one's honne. In many cases, tatemae can lead to lying, in order to avoid expressing one's true inner feelings. A good example of this, which is something you will encounter often in Japan.
すいません、今何時ですか
12時半です。
ありがとうございました。
Somebody giving a positive response when that's not what they really feel. For instance, saying they like your new haircut when they actually hate it. This is something that was actually exploited by Logan Paul whenever he was in Japan, because many Japanese people that he interacted with acted like they liked him, when in fact they were just being polite. In actuality, a lot of them probably felt a large amount of resentment for him. And with my knowledge of the Japanese culture and my experience with interacting with Japanese people, I could definitely see a large amount of disdain in a lot of their faces. This actually makes dating in Japan kind of frustrating sometimes. Now, I'm not going to say that dating in Japan is difficult, but it can be frustrating at times because lots of times girls will give a positive response whenever you ask them to go on a date, but instead of, you know, canceling the date, they just won't show up. And this kind of goes along with the Chinese idea of saving face, because they don't want to hurt your feelings, but they end up hurting your feelings anyway.
No! Now you listen to me. I don't like you. I never liked you. And the only reason I gave you that stupid Valentine is because nobody else would.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
So it can be pretty difficult sometimes when gauging if a Japanese girl actually likes you. But thankfully there's a lot of girls in Japan, so you don't normally have to worry about that. And I felt at the time that this applied to my ex-girlfriend, because I felt that throughout the relationship, she had pretended to be interested in me whenever she was dating me for her own peculiar reasons. But in actuality, it was just my inability to accept an obvious reality. But back to the subject at hand. In a big way, the development of honne and tatemae can be understood as a necessity resulting from a large number of people living on a small island. Close-knit cooperation was necessary for maintaining peaceful relationships with others. For this reason, Japanese people tend to go to great lengths to avoid conflict. especially in the context of large groups. This was further expanded by the growing influence of the West throughout the mid to late 1800s. Contemporary phenomena such as the hikikomoris, which I may make another video about later on, but they're basically Japanese shut-ins, which are young men, which through some research that I've done are actually oftentimes on the autism spectrum, but they can be seen as Japanese culture's new generation being unable to cope with the requirements of Honne and tatemae. So now at request, I'm going to spread this concept into the spread of gossip. While the concept of in-group and out-group exists throughout all cultures and societies, it is particularly strong in Japan due to the fact that Japan is a very homogeneous nation. It is very collectivist in nature. I have developed a belief over the years, not just in application to Japan, but in general, it is easier for people that fit into stereotypes to make it through life. It feels like with Honne and tatemae, there is also a bit of stereotyped thinking when it comes to dealing with foreigners. For example, my ex-girlfriend was upset whenever I didn't like Lord of the Rings because she had stereotyped me as like the nerdy foreigner guy that was into, you know, Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, which...
Wow. Hey mom, I'm Japanese now, okay?
I've never been a particularly big fan of either of those. And she got into a relationship with me based upon that stereotype instead of for who I actually am. The problem for me and other people like me in Japan is that we don't fit into stereotypes. So we meet a fair amount of resistance whenever we don't fit into somebody's expectations of who we are supposed to be based upon their perception. An issue for me throughout my early to mid 20s is that I look like your basic nerdy geeky guy that it looked like I would just, you know, sit around being boring and playing video games and doing math equations or whatever it is that smart people do. I don't know.
This, for example, was under H for toy. It's yet another in a long series of diversions in an attempt to avoid responsibility. You see, Mitch, I used to be you. And lately I've been missing me, so I asked Hathaway if I could room with me again, and he said sure.
The problem is I was always going out to bars and clubs, but then I would end up having to deal with this, you know, the stereotype of being, you know, a playboy or just a guy that wasn't very serious. And I only ended up being, you know, somewhat like that after a series of bad relationships in Japan. So since I didn't fit into any of these stereotypes, these opposing, you know, diametrically opposed stereotypes, it created a lot of cognitive dissonance for both me and the people around me. And nobody knew how to think of me, so instead of trying to understand me, they would fill in the holes with their own preconceived notions. So while being in Japan can make it easier to be your own individual, it also comes with its own pitfalls. And granted, I'm speaking in general terms. Even though a large amount of Japan is homogenous, not everybody is like this, and I do have a very good amount of Japanese friends. But it's pointless for me to speak entirely anecdotal if I'm going to get a message across, so I apologize if anything in this video offended you. I can only try to be as honest as I can be, so that's all I want to say with this video. You know, keep in mind, if you have a question, feel free to ask. As you can see, as I've been saying, I will make, if it's something I can't answer in a comment, I'll make a video about it and I'll include your comment in the video. So that's it. So as always, if you like my video, subscribe. If you like my music, buy it. And if you hate me, tell everybody. Out.